Welcome everyone to the penultimate panel in our Conversations program. I'm absolutely thrilled to welcome on stage the artist Antony Gormley, speaking to Demeester, the director of Kunsthaus Zürich. Please join me in giving Anne and Antony a very warm welcome to the conversation stage.
Thank you, Lorraine. Antony, as we have 45 minutes and I've prepared at least 12 very simple questions, we'll have to rush. But I'm sure you have more to say than my questions trigger. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen, or good afternoon. It's interesting, Antony, that you as a sculptor, we're in the new media and digital art section. Your piece here is on the other side of the room, and I thought let's just start in medias res with presence. There's a work of you present at the fair, and I wonder, before we travel into the past and maybe talk about your primary concerns in the past and in the present, would you care to say something about what we're seeing at Unlimited and how that relates to your ongoing interests?
Sure. Bonsoir tout le monde. There are two works here, and I was delighted to be able to show them together. And they're called Here and Now. And they're essentially both made from a single loop that is essentially a Moebius strip. It's a flat piece of steel that basically maps the internal space of the body, but then also maps the architecture against which this body is found. And for me, this is a way of encouraging a proprioceptive moment, maybe, in the viewer, that somehow through the work you might become more conscious of your own position in space and actually in time, because the other side of the room that they were kind enough to make me is a work called Now. And yeah, I think we can make a big thesis or a small one about this. I mean, we live in a cyber age in which I think we're slowly being encouraged to think that maybe information is an exchange, can be exchanged for experience. And I'm very, very, very keen on the idea that sculpture, by its very nature, reinforces first-hand physical experience and brings us back to the truth of living in a body.
And is it essential for sculpture to do that? It's like, I mean, I remember the first studio visit I ever had as a baby curator was with Royden Rabinovich, and he said, Anne, I'm going to tell you, never mistake, never confuse sculptors and painters. We do radically different things. Sculptors can draw, but so why is sculpture such an essential factor in bringing back that bodily experience? I mean, it's self-evident, but I would love to hear it from you.
Yeah, I never met Rabinovich, but I like his work. I think that the truth is that sculpture is a thing in the world. We can think of the world as made of things, but sculpture is a thing in the world that often refuses to play the game of other functional things in the world. So it's not about making pictures, it's about being what it is. And through being what it is, changing the world. And this is a radically different attitude, I think, to what art can do. And I think, that then brings the much bigger question of, in a way, the change that was necessary. In order for me to bring the body back into sculpture, I had to do it in a way that, in some senses, grew out of all of the liberations that sculpture had, in a way, been through, often to do with the liberation from the statue. And that led me to realize that actually I only had one choice, which was to use my own body as material, as tool, and as subject. And that's the way. All of the work starts with me being in the position that the whatever this thing we can call it, I call some of them body forms. This is a strap work, so it's a form of three-dimensional drawing, the one that's here. But I think of them all as, in a sense, a bearing witness to what it feels like to live inside a body. And in that term, it is completely different from the idealization, from the narrative, from all of the jobs of portraiture, and the pursuit of beauty, perhaps, per se, that the sculpture of the body in history has been concerned with.
Before I came, I took this book out of the library, an amazing book in which you and Martin Gayford explore the history of culture as sculpture and act upon a lot of those premises. But I also, of course, I mean, you're going to forgive me for this cliche, I walked through our Giacometti collection again. The Kunsthaus has a wonderful Giacometti collection. And in a very different context and different way, Giacometti, at a certain point, like you, made the decision to reintroduce the human figure, a recognizable human figure, figuration as well. And Giacometti was punished for that in the first instance by the surrealists who chucked him out, who said, like, this is completely not avant-garde. And I think your turning point of really reintroducing the physical figure, your body, was around the 80s. Did you also have to face this kind of, or when we read reviews, people are raving, but they're also saying this is radically retrograde. Why do we need the human figure back into sculpture? Could you tell us a little bit about?
No. I mean, I was anathema, I think, at the beginning. If we think of, where I guess I started, which is, I guess I left the Slade in 1979, but all of my rather late formation in art school was from 74 to 79, and that was really the time of conceptualism, minimalism, and the work of previously to that, Caro and Richard, Philip King. When I realized that actually the truth that I wanted to bear witness to was, as it were, what it felt like to live inside a body, I think, there was that Gormley guy, that's really embarrassing. He's kind of making bad figurative sculpture. But I didn't think that's what I was doing. I was making body cases. They were called body cases, these lead-covered, in a way, boxes in human form that held a void, that sometimes you could see through apertures in the... Sorry, can you all hear me? Am I speaking clearly enough? That you could see through either holes left in the eyes or in the anus, or completely enclosed. And what I felt, what I was doing was indicating a human space in space, but taking it out of time, so that your time, the time of the viewer, was in some way implicated in this encounter with something that was very evidently not portraiture, but that somehow bared witness to a moment of lived human life. And that's equally true of the work here. So I guess my hope for sculpture is that it's a probe. On the one hand, it probes the reality that surrounds it, but that it also will be used by the viewer as a reflexive instrument. That sounds very, very kind of...
It sounds very discursive, and at the same time your work is very physical as well. It's a direct experience.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, I'm having been initially, criticized for doing boring bodies. I'm now more kind of routinely criticized for being too cerebral
And too intellectual, too discursive, too meta.
when actually what I think I'm doing is trying to deal with life as directly as possible. And the work has always dealt with feeling, always dealt with emotion, always tried to, even in works like this, which you might say has, well, there's no body being evoked
Depicted.
there, but actually it's the body of the viewer that has to, in some way, animate this space. And I guess in these works, I'm trying to say, we do live in this second body that exists, following certain very, very precise rules of orthogonal organization. But in here, I'm kind of saying, well, here's the height of a door. Here's the height of a windowsill. Here's the height of a table. Here's the height of a chair. But they're not functional, but they kind of, you remember, you have a body, you have a muscle memory that links you to that. And then maybe it's you who become then part of the work and start being the viewed for other viewers. And I've just been to the Pierre Huyghe, and I have to chapeau to Pierre, because I think that show, and I want you all to go and see it, because that was an incredible example of a show in which he's used the body of the museum to reinforce the first-hand experience of the viewer, of the temperature of the room, of how light comes into it, about what the acoustic environment is. And I think here is a work called Ariel, which this is the last show I did in New York, which is trying to say, well, I can, as a sculptor, I can shape space, but I don't have to enclose it. I can simply structure it. So this is like me borrowing something from Mondrian, saying, can you describe space? But here I'm not describing it, I'm structuring it, using just horizontal and vertical elements, but in a way that then invites you, or makes you, move through that space in a different way. So that, anyway, to get back to Pierre, I think that he has done what I was trying to do in that work in such a sublimely involving way, so that with these windows that go from being opaque to becoming clear, with, in a way, sonic ambient sounds that sort of somehow reflect maybe internal noises of the body. And so sorry.
No, it was a beautiful love letter to Pierre Huyghe. I hope he hears it somehow.
This is interesting, because this is how we could contextualize what I've shown here. So there's what is over in Unlimited. But you can see I started like mapping the internal condition of the body, and there are maybe a few examples like this where I'm actually saying, but where's the tension? And I might like fix it in the solar plexus or in the neck. Or with these, I'm moving out into the context, and then there are in-between works where I'm beginning to break the body, the bounding condition. You can think that's another obsession, that in a way sculpture of the body has been obsessed with the skin and how light kind of falls on skin, even Rodin. But he had to...
One in your tribute, this is the kiss.
Oh, yeah, there it is.
Proper dress.
But, I think that for me, I've always wanted to, in some senses, break through the bounding condition of the body and extend. And, the natural next first skin is the skin of a room, which is where we began talking about here.
And on that note, Anthony, because you also currently have a show in Kamiska, Antwerp, in the Museum of Fine Arts.
Which you know quite well. Or
I know it well. I'm Belgian, and so the Museum of Fine Arts in Antwerp is a key reference, although it has been closed for many, many years.
Yeah,
so
it was closed for 11 years.
For 11 years, so it's a kind of distant memory. But I think doing that kind of show is not new for you. You worked inside of, I think, even the Hermitage. You worked in every possible context. But you just gave us a love letter to Pierre Guig. But there you're indirectly surrounded by Ensor, Rubens, Van Dyck. But the exhibition itself takes place in clinically white rooms. And so I wonder, how... As an artist, you have really worked in an amazing amount of different contexts, directly in nature, in the fair, in a historical museum. And of course that has an effect, but I wonder, how does it affect your conceptual thinking? I mean, it affects the presentation of the work, but what does it do to you in your thinking?
You have to work with context as material. It's never a box. It's never just a frame. So I always want to work, even if it is a temporary exhibition. And I have some critique of, in a way, how the art of our time has been commodified and institutionalized, and we are now used to thinking about art as in its first engagement with a public as being a temporary installation, playing the game of theatre. And I think that is denying one of the great things that sculpture can do, which is essentially make a place that, draws people. If you just have to do the kind of thought experiment. How many sculptures can you think about without thinking about where they are? And that's true of Mesolithic works, if you think about Stonehenge or, the alignement in Karnak. Or if you think of, the grand hyperstyle of Karnak in Egypt. These extraordinary places where somehow the forming of matter has been made in place and animates and makes that place magnetic and makes you want to go there. So I think that's a condition that I think has been, in a way, modernism reduced the arena of an artist's work increasingly towards the studio and to mobile objects. And I'm very, very keen to re-establish the connection between sculpture and place making. And so I've done that as well. I mean, when you say you were listing things, institutions and situations that I've been involved in, but I would say the things that I am most invested in and proud of are things like inside Australia. Now, the Asian field that is part of the permanent collection of M+, where you'll be going tomorrow. Then the Angel of the North, the work that I'm making now for South Korea, Elemental, which will be the biggest work that I've ever made.
What is it? Can you give us a sneak preview?
It's made out of 37 space frames that are made of stainless steel, the biggest of which is 14 meters square. But the section is only 250 millimeters. It's 110 meters long, 23 meters high, 18 meters deep, and sits on a tide plane that is about 170 meters deep.
So definitely.
And at high tide, the work will be about 2 meters underwater. It's in a very, very remote. It's in Bigium Island in Shinan province, which is 4 hours by high-speed train to a place called Mokpo that probably most of you haven't been to. Then about an hour's ferry ride, and then about 40 minutes by
Does it not
Bicycle.
want to be seen? Is it?
I think it's going to be seen by fishes, by crabs. They're really beautiful little crabs, and then I hope that the people who live on this island, that are amongst the most grounded people that I've ever met. They make salt out of seawater.
Salt,
evaporated in the sun, and that cubic form of salt is what I took as my inspiration for this work. Essentially, it's a parinirvana. All of you will know what that is. That's a lying Buddha. This is the moment that the Buddha returns his body, or the elements of his body, to the elements at large. And you will come through a rainforest, through the dunes, into this beach. You will see nothing but this chaotic framing of a distant horizon. Jinan province is made of over 1,000 islands, of which 800 are uninhabited. And you just look at this sea that seems to go on forever, dotted with these islands. For those of you who've been to Naoshima, you know what I'm talking about. It's a very similar effect. You will be invited, depending on the height of the tide, either to swim in the work or to walk through it.
Wow.
But then you can leave the beach and go up a mountain that happens to be a little bit higher than this work is long. And then you will see it's a body. And you'll see that it is facing the horizon. And I'm thinking that this is, to continue my love letter to Pierre Huyghe, if he's thinking in a way of a post-anthropic future, if he's thinking about where our species' history is taking us, where our history's future will be made, I'm really thinking about how our species is going to or not going to contribute to the continuation of evolution on this planet. And I think at this time it's just very, very important to me to make these works that have absolutely nothing to do with all of the issues that are uppermost in people's minds here in Art Basel. And think about how art can be, in a way, a reflexive space in which people can think about how they, each and every one of us, in some senses, is making the future.
It reminds me of we recently had a talk in the Opera House in Zurich, co-organized by the Kunsthaus with an astrophysicist, and she really, it was a sort of ballistic missile that she launched in my mind, where she spoke about the Big Crunch. She's like, the theory of the Big Crunch has recently become popular again amongst astrophysicists, believing that our universe is not infinite. Our universe will, at a certain point, I think in 33 billion years, contract.
We won't be there.
No, I know, but it was more like, we always thought that we as a species are finite, but the universe is infinite.
Yeah.
And her sort of explaining in very, very simple words the theory of the Big Crunch. No, we are finite, and we are now accelerating the destruction of the Earth through climate change. But the universe itself is finite. It will stop. It will concentrate into a singularity.
Think we're talking about theoretical prognostications that are inherently unprovable. If you believe in string theory and if you believe the theory of brain multiverses, you go down a very interesting rabbit hole in which, whether you're a white hole or a black hole believer, whether you're a Color Ravelli or a Roger Penrose believer, you have brains which rub against each other, and you can go through, one of the potentially 37 dimensions of which we are only aware of 4, perhaps, or 6 if we're very clever, and go into a totally other, you could say, form of manifestation of energy. and there's no question. I mean, my feeling is that the nanoscale may be more understandable even in a quantum world than the macro, and I think that. But if we're talking about somewhere between the Planck and the infinite scale, I would say that we are at an interesting moment where our species as a whole has to decide whether it continues with business as usual or whether we want to find ways in which we're going to work with the planet, with the biosphere. Somebody said to me not very long ago that the total weight of the biosphere is 1/billionth of the mass of the planet. If you could do such a thing as put the planet in a weighing scale, you would discover that that thin meniscus, what Bruno Latour calls the critical zone, is 1/billionth part of the total mass. And it's that we depend on entirely. And it's that ever since the Industrial Revolution, we have been destroying. And if we go on with our extractive economies, of which the art world is a part, it just won't survive. The superficial nature of it won't survive. But we know that in the deep oceans that we know so little about, life will regenerate, but what form it will take next time round, we don't know. But I think that's the scale that we have to be aware of. In a sense, what happens in 33 billion years is, I think, a horizon too far.
It felt liberating. We're going to be destroyed anyhow, and the universe with it. But bringing it back to something more tangible, Antony, you said in many, many interviews, and you repeated it here now, your own body is in a way a departure point for many of the work. And I wondered there's been many pieces where you used the body of others, and one particular one that I love is a commission you did on Trafalgar Square, the plinth, I think 2009.
I think there's some pictures of it, maybe, or maybe not. I can't remember.
Oh.
I can't remember now. But anyway.
I also didn't see the carousel, where you actually, the plinth on Trafalgar Square, I don't know, 2,400 people,
that's exactly
regular
right.
people, were invited to occupy it for one day.
For an hour each. An hour each. 24 hours a day, night and day, rain and shine. And you had to turn up. And if you didn't turn up, there was a backup who would... so it was the continual occupation of a plinth 7.25 meters high above Trafalgar Square, which is one of the great kind of places of protest, but also collective action in Britain, that was made for, George IV. Nobody liked him very much. So they never made the equestrian statue that was supposed to go on it. Anyway, it's been used for all sorts of things, but I felt that this was a really good opportunity to, in a way, make a collective work in time. We set up a webcam and a space where that was broadcast to the world. In real time for the whole 100 days that it happened. And that was 24,000 people, 24 hours a day.
I thought it was a beautiful antithesis to the rest of your work, because this was about process, and it was definitely about the body of others. And it was also not about a sculpture representing a body, it was about physical presence. So I saw it as a beautiful diversion in your practice, but how do you see it?
I think this was my logical response to the condition of that plinth, and I didn't think. Anyway, this was the best idea that I could come up with. But when you talk about presence, I would say that there are many ways in which I have tried to acknowledge, you could say, the collective. There's a work called Domain Field, which was a collaboration with 287 individuals living within the Newcastle Gateshead area, which were then molded and turned into domains. There was, the work in Poggi Bonsi, Fai Spazio Prende Posto, where we had 7 of the inhabitants of that town molded, and then they're still there. The works that I made, which were the very first, in a way, physical pixelations. So that idea of acknowledging the collective body has always been in the work, I would say, and continues to be in the work. So the work that's on show in San Gimignano at the moment, What Holds Us, is called Inner City, and that again is talking about the collective body, but doing it through the language of body buildings, like this one at KMSKA. So I wouldn't think maybe in its performative aspect you could say, well, that's a bit of a divergence, but then you could say, well, all of the work comes from a performative process, because I take my clothes off and I'm no longer covered in plaster, but I am scanned. So last week we did maybe 32 new scans for a whole series of double works that I'm making. So the performative and the presence
is always there.
Is always there, and I think it moves from being, as it were, this indexical, forensic proof of where a body once was, to then the engagement of the living bodies of people that come through it. So something like this, this is a cave that is
what
presently. This is, or this inner city. This is inner city. The presence of the viewer is terribly important to this. This is just cardboard. This is 15 body buildings made out of this material that is very much of our time. That rose with the rise of online shopping, and yet, without people getting down on their hands and knees and kind of exploring the inner spaces of these bodies that are also buildings, it has no meaning. And it was wonderful. Actually, children showed the way, as you can see. Children showed the adults how to leave aside the normal decorum of, in a way, gallery and museum behavior, and have a bit of fun.
And this is a very playful kind of sculpture that really demands of the viewer to physically interact with it. And all throughout thinking of this conversation, I had a question in mind that I'm not sure if I should ask, because it sounds a bit indiscreet. As you take your own body as a reference point, you're also aging. You're going through the 7 stages of men.
Yeah.
So how does that affect the world? Because if your own body is such a physical point of departure, that body changes. Your body is not the body you had 20, 30 years ago. So how does that affect how you think, create, feel, and interact with material?
Well, I had to, in order to make the 3 works that are outside KMSKA in Antwerp, I had to remake 3 full plaster casts, plaster moldings of myself. And all I can tell you is, standing stock still for an hour and a half these days is a lot more trouble than it was 30 years ago. I think time in the body is another subject. I think that you could say the show, well, maybe even this is Resting Place. Resting Place has that kind of overtone of, a graveyard. I'm aware that the body is an assembly that will fall apart. So in the works that I'm showing in What Holds Us, the first works that you come to are reversed caryatids, very precarious stackings of volcanic stone that is entirely dependent on the architecture. So you could say, or in this, this is something that I made in Bukhara in Uzbekistan. These are double life size, but they're still just very precarious stacks of unfired clay made in the same tradition that has been made there for about 4,000 years. And they talk about human vulnerability and precarity while being, you could say, monumental in scale. And that's exactly what the three works that you, as you come into the show in San Gimignano, you see. These are monumental in scale, but express, I think, human precarity.
So they have this paradoxical quality of both being very fragile and very bold at the same time.
And I think the same here. You could say some of these are doing yoga, some of them are like in positions of, but you have to work a bit. I mean, as a viewer, you have to work out what's happening. Some of them look like they're on the beach. Some of them look like they're in serious stress. I mean, like...
But there's a myriad of associations there. I mean, I think of Cy Twombly, but also of Fortnite. I think of sort of Muslim graves, but also of a kind of sophisticated Tetris. So they seem to be both like eternal in their references and very contemporary.
This is a meditation on whatever happened. They call it the Neolithic Revolution, but the decision that our forgotten ancestors made to come together and make, as it were, lasting habitats that could exist over generations. I made this in full understanding of what was happening in Gaza, in what was happening in Mariupol. The relationship between defensiveness and creativity, the twin poles, you could say, of human urgency, are very, very related. So these works, and you could say that Inner City is another one where we're making something out of very, very, you could say, recyclable material, in a way, kind of temporal material. But that talks about the wish for, in a way, permanence in our architectural settings and the hope that a city will be a place of meeting. But, having listened to William Dalrymple's 12-part history of Gaza, and you realize that it has been completely destroyed 7 times, starting with the Achaemenids, then the Sasanians, then the Greeks, then the Romans, and finishing up with the British. But this meditation on, in a way, the second body, why, as a species that has no fur, we have had to, as it were, make environments that protect us. But once you have a protection, you are also a target. That dialectic, that paradoxical dialectic, is very deep in our psyche, as is that relationship between violence and productive creativity.
And you've repeatedly said in many different forms and ways that, riffing on that your aim as an artist is to contribute to the development of human consciousness, or that, art connects...
That sounds very pretentious, doesn't it?
Well, I think it's quite necessary. And you're in good company. Hans Haag said artists work in the garden of consciousness. But I think particularly in the current time, you've also always made this link between the past and a potential future. But probably every generation says that. But now you reference Gaza, you reference the total destruction that we're witnessing. We live in a moral wilderness. We live in a world that is very, very much in disarray. Does that mean that you stick to your guns and say what I do is even more necessary, and I have to continue.
You must
on this
believe
path.
that.
I absolutely
believe
do.
that. I really, really believe, and we can put aside, as it were, my snidey comments about the fiscal nature of this meeting place. But I think we're all here because we know that the space that art gives us as a space of reflection and reimagining and redirecting our energies is utterly precious. And in a time where we have career politicians, in a way, managing the way we organize our common resources. Art is a really important alternative space in which alternatives to business as usual can be found. So yeah, I mean that idea that art is a matrix in which human consciousness and indeed where we aim our energies is so important. I mean, it's so urgent and so critical.
That's why we're here. Well, maybe not here, but that's why we're
why
trying
you
to
do what
create
you
and
do
produce
what
art.
I do why I do what I do. Absolutely.
I think, Antony, those are beautiful words to close this session with, unless we were not allowed to take questions from the room. But is there a question I should have asked you that I didn't?
I don't know. These questions and answers, I mean, I enjoy this process, which is really like meeting you, who, in a sense, I never meet, because my work is of its nature, a invitation, but I never go to the party, as it were. You are the party, and that thing that makes art precious for me is that it's an offer. Come in to this space and see what you can do with it. And that's a collaboration. I'm not trying to prove anything. I think I'm asking questions through these materialized, in a way, spaces that I make, which I find necessary in order for me to, aim my energies. But I absolutely believe that art is made to be shared. It doesn't make any sense unless it is shared. And I absolutely believe that I am not the sole, well, I'm certainly not the sole generator of its potential meaning. And that's where, why I agreed to come and talk this afternoon, because I think the extraordinary thing about art is that it has actually become more and more participatory. And going back to my love letter to Pierre Huyghe, I mean, it was just absolutely wonderful to feel and see the absolute engagement, the attention that people were giving to their own experience. It wasn't what they were being shown, it was what they were using this environment to do to attend to their own being. And that is hope for me.
That's wonderful. So I think that's an invitation to use art as this reflective room and to sort of meander in between knowledge and wonder. So I think we'll take that with us. It was a full room. Thank you, Antony, for your words. And I hope that all of you go to see Pierre Huyghe, of course, especially Antony's work. Go to Antwerp as well, recommendation. And obviously, you should always go to the Kunsthaus Zürich, but that's without question.
Of course you should. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you, Anne. Thank you, Antony. Thank you, all of you, for being here. And thank you for this invitation to share the art.